From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I do feel betrayed. I feel betrayed through our government, and I feel betrayed by I just, feel like they hadn't done the right thing. They just hadn't been honest with us. They hadn't told the truth about none of it, about the jobs or anything else. They have not told the truth.
A standoff is underway in Texas over construction of the Keystone XL oil pipeline, which would run tar sands oil from Canada to U.S. refineries on the Gulf Coast. We'll speak with Susan Scott. She owns land where the pipeline will run, and with actress Daryl Hannah, who was arrested there last week and has long been active in protests against the pipeline.
We cannot afford to poison our soil, our fresh water. We need that money and those jobs that were going to go towards this pipeline to go towards real solutions, American, U.S.-made, community-based energy like solar, like wind, like geothermal.
Then we'll speak with In These Times reporter Mike Elk about his new expose. Koch sends pro-Romney mailing to 45,000 employees while stifling workplace political speech.
The boss is constantly talking about politics in the workplace, and all of a sudden a bunch of your coworkers are wearing Republican buttons. Does that mean you have to wear one too? If all of your other coworkers are going out and volunteering with your boss on the weekend for GOP candidates, does that mean if you want to get a raise, you have to go out and volunteer for a GOP candidate as well? Then
Mother Jones looks at how the Romney and Obama campaigns are digitally mining personal data in order to get out the vote. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York. New details have been revealed on the efforts by Democrats and Republicans to mine American voters' personal data to influence the outcome of next month's election. The New York Times reports the Obama and Romney campaigns are purchasing an unprecedented amount of personal information from private companies and using it to encourage or convince targeted voters to head to the polls. The information collected includes everything from religious ties, interest in pornographic sites, product preferences, financial status, social media affiliations, and whether a voter has gay friends. That information is then used to shape the approach of unsolicited phone calls from campaign staffers to the voters based on how they've been analyzed. Some voters will even be pushed to vote by being publicly shamed when the campaign publicly divulges how frequently they and their neighbors have previously voted in the hopes that public disclosure will spur them to action. We'll have more on campaign data mining later in the broadcast. With just over 3 weeks until the election, President Obama and Republican challenger Mitt Romney will hold their second debate Tuesday at New York's Hofstra University. On Friday, Romney and vice presidential nominee Paul Ryan addressed supporters in Ohio just hours after Ryan squared off against Vice President Joe Biden.
When it came to jobs, both last night with Vice President Biden and in my debate with President Obama, they didn't have a plan for creating jobs for middle-income Americans. They say they care about middle-income Americans, and I believe they care. They just don't know what to do. And so they say, well, they're going to have another stimulus. How'd the last one work out, you know?
What we are witnessing when we turn on our TVs on a daily basis is the unraveling of the Obama foreign policy.
Yes, we are.
And when you say it's okay to impose these devastating cuts in our military, or that we don't need any more Lima-built M1 tanks, what we are doing is we're projecting weakness. And when we project weakness abroad, our enemies become more brazen. Our enemies are more tempting to test us, and our allies are less willing to trust us.
Vice President Biden, meanwhile, addressed supporters in Wisconsin, where he said the differences between the two campaigns are as stark as any in his lifetime.
Anyone who watched that debate, I don't think there's any doubt that that Congressman Ryan and I, Governor Romney and the President, we have a fundamentally different vision for America and, quite frankly, a fundamentally different value set. And the fact is that the differences that we have about the future of this country are, quite frankly, profound. They're as profound as any differences in any presidential campaign that I've observed, that I've been involved in.
We will be covering the presidential debate Tuesday night live from Hofstra. It will be in a town hall format, and we'll be bringing out the voices of people on the Hofstra campus. On Wednesday morning, we will bring you excerpts of the debate between presidential candidates Mitt Romney and President Obama, and we will continue our Expand debate series with third-party candidates. The Syrian government's being accused of continuing to drop cluster bombs on civilian areas in recent attacks on rebel strongholds. In a new report, Human Rights Watch says the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has used military planes and helicopters to drop the cluster munitions, further endangering civilians with the unexploded bomblets left on the ground. Human Rights Watch UN Director Philippe Balopian condemned the bombings.
If we needed any further proof of the Syrian government's complete disregard for the lives of its own citizens and its own children, well, here it is. Because we know now that the government is using cluster munitions in populated areas. And of course, these weapons are extremely dangerous for the civilian population and the children, because most of the bomblets that are left on the ground do not detonate on impact, and they remain active for weeks, months, and sometimes years.
The British government has announced plans to withdraw thousands of troops from Afghanistan next year. British Defense Secretary Philip Hammond says despite the withdrawals, more than half of British troops in Afghanistan will still remain behind until the U.S. pulls out 1 year later, in 2014.
I would expect it to be significant, which means thousands, not hundreds. Yes. But I would not expect it to be the majority of our forces.
Okay, so we're talking about something like 4,000. It sounds to me that wouldn't be.
Well, we will have by the beginning of 2013, we'll have 9,000 troops there, and by the end of 2014, we'll have virtually none.
So we can do the maths.
I would expect there to be a significant step at the end of 2013.
A warning to our television audience of graphic content. A new study has provided further evidence of the damage to Iraqi public health caused by the 2003 U.S. invasion and occupation. The Bulletin of Environmental Contamination and Toxicology found staggering increases in Iraqi birth defects and miscarriages in the Iraqi cities of Basra and Fallujah, which both endured heavy U.S. bombing. Iraqi children were found to have elevated levels of mercury and lead, key elements in the manufacture of bullets and bombs. Overall, the study says U.S. bombings have left a, quote, footprint of metal in the population, causing a public health crisis. Next March will mark the Iraq War's 10th anniversary. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 suspected co-conspirators will appear today in a Guantanamo Bay military courtroom for a pre-trial hearing in their tribunals for plotting the 9/11 attacks. All 5 of the men were once held in secret CIA prisons before being sent to Guantanamo in 2006. Ahead of today's hearing, the military prosecutor and the military attorney in the case sparred over the admissibility of the suspects' alleged torture while in U.S. custody.
I have said that no statement under the Military Commissions Act obtained as a result of torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or coercion is admissible. That's true. That refers to the prosecution's case against an accused. It can't be admitted. That is not to imply that there can be no addressing by the military commission of evidence of mistreatment. I've never said that, and that's not what the Military Commissions Act reads.
From a legal perspective, it's unconscionable that somehow the government would maintain that 3.5 years or 4.5 years of someone's life can't be discussed. And not just those years where they may not have been doing anything of substance, but those years where our government tortured them.
The Pakistani teenage activist shot for advocating girls' education has been flown to Britain to undergo further medical treatment. 14-year-old Malala Yousafzai was on her way home from school last Tuesday when Taliban militants shot her in the head and neck, leaving her critically wounded. The Taliban says she was deliberately targeted for her vocal campaigning against efforts to stop girls from attending school. On Sunday, a Pakistani military spokesperson briefed reporters on Malala's treatment and the effort to apprehend her attackers.
We met the team of doctors, and as per them, Malala is still on ventilator. They reduced her sedation today in order to carry out a better clinical assessment by the neurosurgeons. That happened. Malala did respond to that, and she did move her forelimbs, which is a positive development that way. There have been apprehensions, there are investigations which are going on, and everyone concerned is trying to pursue and get hold of the gang which was involved in doing this.
The Philippine government has signed a preliminary peace deal with the country's largest Muslim rebel group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The pact lays the groundwork for negotiations to resolve the conflict by 2016. Steps would include the establishment of an autonomous Muslim region in the southern region of the island of Mindanao. Talks, meanwhile, begin today in Norway between the Colombian government and Colombia's largest rebel group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. Ahead of the negotiations, Christian Berg of Norway's Peace Research Institute, Oslo, said addressing economic inequality and establishing lasting trust will be pivotal to a successful agreement.
Challenges in Colombia are certainly running very, very deep. Trust is in itself a key problem, given that the last negotiations and the ceasefire concluded in the context of those negotiations were basically misused by the government to clamp down on some of its adversaries. Also, the economic inequality in Colombia is of massive dimensions. And one critical issue in the negotiations will be the ability to really look at economic redistribution.
The talks are due to move on to Cuba after concluding in Norway. 10 people were arrested in Bahrain on Friday when government forces disrupted a pro-democracy protest. Police fired tear gas and stun grenades at a crowd of hundreds of demonstrators marching against the U.S.-backed Sunni monarchy. It was the latest in a series of protests against the Bahraini regime. Bahrain is a key U.S. government ally hosting the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. Rallies were held in dozens of cities Saturday under the banner of Global Noise, a worldwide day of protest against austerity and inequality. Organizers called on demonstrators to create a global casserole march inspired by protests featuring the banging of pots and pans by the Indignados in Spain and the Red Square Students movement in Quebec. In Madrid, thousands marked Global Noise with a march to the headquarters of the European Union just one day after it was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize. Police in Denver are investigating the shooting of President Obama's local campaign office Friday. People were inside the office when a single bullet was fired through the window. No one was injured. And former Pennsylvania Senator Arlen Specter has died at the age of 82. Specter achieved national prominence in the early 90s during the confirmation hearings of future Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas when he harshly questioned Anita Hill, the law professor who'd accused Thomas of sexual harassment. Specter drew criticism after accusing Hill of perjury and helping to push through Thomas's controversial appointment. A longtime Republican, Specter again made headlines in 2009 when he crossed the aisle to join the Democrats. He retired after losing his seat the following year. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.